When you ask people about slavery, most people think it's long gone, a relic from history that's important to remember, but isn't very relevant. They conjure images of people stuffed into the bottom of a ship going across the Atlantic, big chains around people's wrists and necks, slave drivers whipping fellow human beings as they work in the heat of the day. But if you ask an average person about modern slavery, odds are they will tell you it doesn't exist, or if it does, it doesn't affect them. I mean, they don't own slaves, nor do they condone slavery, so how many slaves could the average person actually use? Well, let's take a look. This is an average American man, with an average income, average house, living in an average city. His day starts like anyone else's day, with a hearty breakfast and a nice glass of orange juice. He realizes he can't make his morning coffee without being late, so he decides to swing by Starbucks on his way to work for a large caramel macchiato. He knows it's more of a feminine drink, but he doesn't mind. He also grabs a small chocolate croissant and heads to work. It's a busy day at work, so our average American checks his iPhone for his meeting schedule. Oh geez, he's got a meeting with Carol first thing in the morning. Carol is the worst. After his absolutely dreadful meeting with Carol, he sits down at his desk to work away at his Mac, check his iPhone for messages every now and again, and head to meetings, until the day is over. Around 5:30, he says that it's time to go home. So, he hops into his 2008 Toyota Camry and heads home. Yes, it is an older model, but it's fuel efficient and reliable, so our average man doesn't mind. After such a busy day, he settles down on his couch with a nice meal of baked chicken and some nice Californian red wine to go with it. He admires his new television, a Sony Smart TV, which he got for himself at Christmas. Life is good for our average American citizen, all thanks to the roughly 28 million slaves that work for him and his peers. How could one man use the equivalent of an entire population of Venezuela as slaves without him even knowing they're working for him? Well, let's start from the beginning. Our average American began his day with a hearty breakfast and a glass of orange juice. Little did our subject know that the glass of orange juice that was brought to him by the men and women who picked those oranges for that orange juice, they're nearly always illegal immigrants and paid far, far less than any other workers, sometimes even not at all. Have you ever wondered why you never saw the men and women who actually pick the oranges on orange juice commercials? Just vast, empty orange groves?
Welcome to the Simply Orange Tour. This is our plant. These are our workers, and this is upper management. But what you won't find around here is any freezing, flavoring, or concentrating, which brings us to our end product. Simply Orange. Honestly simple. That's just the night watchman.
It's because it would be very incriminating for the orange juice manufacturers to show illegal immigrants working in their fields in their own commercials. And so it creates an invisible worker problem. Effectively, they're out of sight and they're out of mind. Moving on, our average American heads out and buys Starbucks coffee and a chocolate croissant. Innocent enough? Well, our average American fails to realize that the coffee and the chocolate from his croissant are both first created from slave labor. The coffee beans that Starbucks and many coffee companies buy are sourced from places like South America, East Africa, and even the Yunnan province of China. These places are all notorious for indentured servitude and slavery. No matter how many plantations Starbucks establishes in these areas, an extremely large percentage of the coffee still comes from regions that use slavery, or worse, child slavery. But while Starbucks focuses on moving towards free trade coffee and ending the slavery in that industry, it has shown very little care for the slavery in the chocolate industry. Many companies who deal in chocolate manufacturing or production know that slavery is rampant, especially in countries like the Ivory Coast. Where does Starbucks get the vast majority of its chocolate? Local producers in the Ivory Coast, which almost certainly use child slaves. After his Starbucks run, he went to work, going to the meeting with Carol that he saw on his iPhone. No, Carol is not a slave, nor does he work as a slave, but the people who made his iPhone are. Not normal slaves who would be kidnapped and sold into slavery, but were tricked or somehow coerced into it. These slaves are promised pay to work at large factories if they pay a small fee every month. These fees add up, and the money that is paid is not enough to maintain paying these fees and living. But if you stop paying, you lose your job. Soon the worker sinks lower into debt to the company, soon receiving no pay at all and having it all go right back to the company to pay off debts. This type of slavery is rampant in many Asiatic countries, especially India, Taiwan, and China. Foxconn, the company that actually produces iPhones and iPads for Apple, is known to use this type of slavery, enticing workers and trapping them with debt. Nearly 1 million people, most living like this, work at Foxconn. Soon after work, he drives home in his 2008 Camry. The 2008 Camry, from the very creation of the materials, is created through slavery. Toyota buys the majority of its raw steel, or pig steel, from Brazilian companies. These companies rely on slaves to produce the pig steel. The jungles of northeast Brazil are rife with small encampments and mining camps that workers live and work at. These camps are often extremely unsanitary and dangerous. All sorts of dangerous fumes and chemicals are rampant in these camps. With no safety regulations and just enough to pay to survive, as well as very dangerous working conditions, nearly all the steel in our average American Camry was created by the hands of slaves in Brazil, on the verge of death every day they go to work. When he got home, he left the Camry and got himself some nice chicken and some good wine. This food, much like the oranges for his orange juice, was harvested and processed by slaves, most likely illegal immigrants. These individuals are paid very little, only $1 or $2 for their difficult labor. From the grapes in his wine to the steel in his car, they all use slaves in some capacity. All put together, the majority of his products are made by slaves, all without him even knowing. But together, we can put an end to the use of slave labor and progress towards equality for all people. Equal pay, equal rights, equal lives. It is the responsibility of the privileged that live off the less fortunate to care for them. It is our responsibility to write to our congressmen and congresswomen. It is our responsibility to protest, our responsibility to file complaints to companies, to boycott products, and it is our responsibility to force change for those less fortunate.